I'm very excited. It's no secret. I'm a collector. It's very well documented on all my social medias. If you know me, IRL in real life, I'm a huge collector. And every time you think you have a huge collection, you meet somebody else and you think that your game's been topped, and it actually has been. And the world of collecting, to paraphrase from Dave Bautista, it has to come from here. And I think that's very true with not just collectors, but believe it or not, in the industry. Believe it or not, with people that help create some of the collectibles, toys, action figures, uh, high price statues, and all the different things in between. And we're seeing a huge renaissance right now in the wrestling action figure game. It's not just cornered by juggernauts of brands that we've known for decades. It's coming in from, little engines that could, and they pull into the station real hard and deliver. And I'm very excited because this is somebody I've known for a long time, and it is my first toy making manufacturer experience. I hope to be one of many. So I'm very excited. Representing the Nerd Closet, my man, Rocky Turner. Rocky, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, man. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've known you for a couple of years now. I know you're a jack of all trades. I know there's a lot of different things that you produce and get into. We're going to get into Matt Maniacs. Just closed the pre-orders. Huge buzz. If you've been following Golden Era Wrestling on Instagram for years like I have, you're very, very familiar with his art style, very familiar with his fictitious line of action figures. And all those years, even like when Instagram first started on social media, the idea that these figures could come to life someday was out of the box. Fast forward X amount of years later, we're here. We're seeing figures in that style, licensed, not actual like phony jabronis. We're seeing the real deal. We're seeing top tier tag teams. We're going to get to that. For those of us who are collectors, to solidify your validity, what is your background in action figures and toys and manufacturing and handling? That way everybody could kind of know, similar to what happened when Power Town came into the game, where is the ethos and experience coming from?
Oh, man. I've been collecting so long. Since I was 5, I would say. Started with my mom picking up a couple of the Masters of the Universe. I believe it was like 82, 83 maybe. And then...
Very early.
Yeah, it took off big time from there. And it just got to the point where I had to have them all. They were all coming out one by one. And she would pile me into the car with my brother, and we'd head to Kmart on Saturdays because my dad worked next door at Kroger's. So we would go in there and do shopping. And I just remember just walls of...
Yeah.
Not only Masters of the Universe, but walls of G.I. Joe and Transformers. This is back in the age where there was no such thing as Kickstarters, pre-orders, anything like that.
Right.
It was these big multi-million-dollar companies trying to figure out how many can we sell. And sometimes that idea blew up in their faces. Sometimes it didn't. But for the most part, back then, you could just walk into a store and find any and all figures that you were looking for, and the stores would just eventually put them on the clearance aisle or the clearance rack and get rid of them that way. But yeah, it all started back way early for me, and then it progressed into, oh man, I collected for years. And of course, freeze frame into my adolescence where I started chasing girls. I wasn't much into the toys.
Sure,
then.
I can relate to that.
And then probably got back into it in my early 20s. My girlfriend / wife at the time knew I was into horror movies, and I had some collectibles and stuff like that. And she started getting me the Movie Maniacs.
Ah, yes.
From McFarlane that had Freddy and Jason and Michael Myers and all those characters. And she got me started on those. And next thing you know, I have them all. And that spilled over into NECA, and then so on and so forth. Over the last 20 years, it's been a little bit of everything. You got Star Wars, you got the new G.I. Joe line I tapped into a little bit, the wrestling figures, obviously. I had Hasbro's back in the 90s. I started rebuying them, down the road after, joining some of these wrestling communities and stuff. Had quite the collection going on then. As you can see behind me, I got some
See some really cool Ghostbuster stuff there.
Ghostbuster stuff. I love Ghostbusters. I love all the 80s stuff. Back to the Future, Indiana Jones. Those are all my jams. Tron.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just progressed from there. And then I think what really started me into the idea that, hey, why can't I make toys?
Sure.
Was the fact of the boom of the 3D printers that started coming out.
Okay.
At first, super expensive. Nobody could afford them. And then they just kept on price gouging each other, price cutting each other to the point where, oh crap, now I can afford to get one of these. So I got my first one. It was a filament printer. I think what brand that was. Anyway,
how many have you been through since then for you to kind of go, oh, I can't remember that one?
3 maybe, not too many.
Okay.
That one was great. My first one was great. But the quality, they were still working on quality issues at the time because you could see the layers of the print.
Is this between 2018 and 2020?
Probably.
Because that's when I'm getting familiar with the 3D print stuff, just before the pandemic.
Yeah, it was right around that time. And of course, there was always, the process of trying to make the print look as good as you could, but there was a lot of sanding and priming, and it was a lot of work to make them really, really, really nice. So fast forward maybe a year or two, and next thing you know, they have the resin printers that print in liquid plastic. So now you have the quality. The build plate's not quite as big, but the quality's there. So I transitioned from that printer to the resin printer. Game changer.
Really?
Next thing you know, I'm printing prototypes, and I'm getting 3D files from different artists across the board, and doing some painting here and there, and I'm just like, I'm baffled. I'm just kind of in awe that this is something that I have in my basement that I can actually print toys with. I mean, who'd have thought back in the day you'd be able to do that? So tech has really moved forward fast.
Now I have to ask my own nerdy question. Are you printing? I mean, of course, it's not just wrestling. I'm a huge wrestling guy. I'm more, to give you a little bit of me, wrestling, Batman, Indiana Jones, massive guy. So are you printing like stuff you didn't buy? Are you printing Hasbro's, LJNs? Like, what are you teasing when you're like, oh, what can I do? What can I not do?
I tell you what, the internet is just flooded with,
isn't it,
3D artists renders.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can think it, it's on there. And that's where I really didn't get into that side of that kind of thing as far as like sculpting, 3D sculpting. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would love to, but my day job does not allow that kind of time to be put into something like that. It's awesome what they do. Those guys sculpt from absolutely nothing but a shape online, and they're using 3D software for that. My hat's off to them. Rewind 20 years, and that was available to me back then. Oh yeah, I'd have been diving into that because I mean, I actually went to school for computer animation, but of course everything has evolved since 1993.
Oh, tremendously, yeah.
We had like 2 Windows-based computers when we were in school.
Right.
Now Windows is everywhere, but back then the internet was just kind of getting rolling, and you had to make an appointment to use one of those Windows computers, which is just crazy.
And now it's like you got a supercomputer at your disposal.
30 years, fast forward 30 years, and now we're printing toys in our basement. So it's
So with that, you're realizing, okay, I can do this. Okay, I can make a business out of this.
Right.
But realistically, you don't have enough to do it out of your basement. You're a one-man band, right? So when do you is outsource the right word to kind of utilize?
Yeah, I mean, there for a few years we were selling toys for other companies, And, eventually, I mean, you just start doing some searching and some research, you'll end up running into a lot of these toy factories that make these same toys for Hasbro and Mattel
Yeah.
and NECA and all these things. If you go looking hard enough, you can find them. And I happened to, with a friend of mine, land a factory over in China that had a decent reputation, and a couple other toy lines had used. So we were like, okay, I think that's the hardest step right there in making toys, is to find somebody that will be able to make them on a mass production
I was
scale.
just saying, mass production is got to
Yeah,
be the hardest part. Finding it, rather.
that's going to be reasonable, because you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, I looked in Mexico, I looked in Canada, I looked here in the U.S., and I mean, just to be honest, they couldn't touch the cost to make them.
Sure. Sure.
China, I mean, I know people, oh, it's China, but let's be honest, their labor over there is a lot cheaper. Their materials are a lot cheaper.
Sure.
So ultimately, their products are going to be cheaper. So that's why, I mean, the entire world is pretty much made by China anymore. But so, we finally land a factory and start chit chatting with them on, what they're actually needing. And then I started reaching out to artists that I had seen here and there, admired their work.
Which had to be a difficult to a degree for you to
It
say,
is really, because I mean, unless you're,
because there's a lot. You brought up the internet. There's a lot to be scoured.
Yeah, I mean, just to name drop a couple of them, Tom Veg is one of them who does incredible head sculpts.
Oh, huge fan of his. Yeah,
love his stuff. Rebel 3D is another. He does a lot of the Masters of the Universe accessories and stuff for Origins figures. Love his stuff. So I reached out to those two guys and chatted with them on a previous line I was doing, and got things in motion with those two guys. They kind of thought I was joking at first, and I'm like, no, I'm wanting to make licensed, mass-produced action figures. This is not a custom job. This is not something I'm just going to print and make one of.
Right.
This is something that you're going to see available to buy online.
And you were realistic in your sales pitch, right? You were like, I just want to poach the market, not take it over.
Right. Right. I just wanted to be part of it. I had no intentions of being numero uno.
Yeah.
So, meeting these artists, and there's so many talented ones out there. I got lucky because I stumbled across Rebel 3D and Tom Veg, and then of course Fraser Davidson with Golden Era of Wrestling, and from there just started chipping away at the process. And it was, it was long and tedious at times, because you're just like, there's a communication barrier between you and China and the factory, and then what they need to produce these figures, what kind of files, what kind of formats, colors, you name it. There's a lot of things that are involved in just, a 3D file. I mean, a lot of people can come up with 3D files, but getting it to be produced, not as much fun.
Right.
But once you've done it, once you've stumbled, once you've stumbled through it, then it just becomes like riding a bike. It's just like, okay, this is what they expect. This is what they need. This is what I need to work on to give them, and get your ducks in a row. And, I dabbled in, some web design stuff. So we had to build a website. There's just a lot of moving parts to making toys and selling them. I mean, it's just not making them. You got to sell them too, and you got to market them. There's a lot of it that some are good at. There's a lot of things that some fall short on.
And but remember that with a smaller production like yours, even though some will say, oh, well, it's not the same medium it was, which I disagree with, your social media, online based, no television.
Right.
So it's an uphill battle, I'm sure.
It is because, I mean, let's be honest, I'm not a millionaire. I mean, Fraser's not a millionaire. I mean,
Right.
it does take money to get started, and marketing. Now I forgot my train of thought.
We were at absence of television.
Right.
Uphill battle.
Let's be honest, little businesses like the Nerd Closet and many others out there cannot afford television advertising, so you go to the next best thing as social media. And even that costs money. Even if you're going to, boost a post on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, it's everything costs money.
Yeah.
But ultimately, marketing is your savior or downfall.
And to peel the curtain back a little bit, you're not putting in $25 to boost a page like some starter influencer is. It's going to be a couple thousand in there.
Yeah. You get what you pay for when it comes to marketing, because I'll tell you what, you can have one of the greatest toy lines in the history of the world, and if nobody knows about it, then there you go.
Right.
Mattel didn't start by just automatically having millions of people buy their toys. They started out small, and they only had a couple different lines, and then the next thing you know, one of them takes off and puts them on the map, and next thing you know, fast forward 60, 70 years, and they're juggernauts. So
right,
you always got to start somewhere, and that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to get a foothold in the toy making business and trying to make the best decisions financially as we can to, climb that ladder of letting people know about our product and what we got coming up. And I think, like with, my partnership with Golden Era of Wrestling and Fraser, lucky me, he had a pretty good following when I met him.
Yeah. Like I said, he's been around for a while.
Yeah, he's been making 3D figures for years, but never had any intentions of making them until I reached out to him, and he's like, "Look, I have a day job too, and I just don't have time to deal with the factory and all that comes with it." And I said, "Hey, I get it." I said, "Technically, I don't have the time to be learning how to 3D sculpt. So it's kind of a I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine type of thing." So we came together, got an agreement in a place, and that made sense for both of us. And then we hit the go button. I started reaching out to, obviously, the Steiner camp. I talked to Scott. I talked to Rick. They were on board once they seen the renders. And then I am actually still friends with Animal's widow, Kim.
Joe Laurinaitis, Road Warrior Animal, right?
Right. I mentioned it to Kim. Hey, I'm working on this, this new line. Would you be interested? Of course, Fraser already had the work done. He already had the renders ready to go. So I had actual fictitious toys to show them to say.
Yeah, you had artwork banked up and you didn't even know it. You could send it to dozens of wrestlers if you wanted to. That's crazy.
And it is because, if you've already got the concept right there in front of them, I mean, there's not much to pitch. Say, hey, this is it. This is what they're going to look like. This is how much it's going to cost. This is where we're going to sell them. This is your bonus. This is your cut. This is what you're going to make. And then it's history from there. They're just like, yep, sign me up. I like those.
It's funny because this goes back to, I don't know if you ever heard the story before. Sean Oliver, Kevin Nash from the Click This podcast. Sean Oliver, big Kiss fan, and he tells this great story. He goes to this book signing in the city in New York. I think at Borders or whatever. Gene Simmons doing his autobiography, very common. And he wants to pitch to him this idea to do Kiss themed ice cream. And like it was 4 flavors, and like each song was a flavor. And during this book signing, he gives Gene the elevator pitch. And Gene Simmons comes and goes, well, let me ask you a question. Do you know anybody in the ice cream business? And he's like, no. Do you know anybody that has a warehouse or manufactures or makes or produces ice cream? No, I don't. Do you know anybody that this packaging of this. No, I don't. He's like, well, then ideas are just ideas if you don't have the resources behind them.
Right.
To paraphrase the idea. So because of your experience in other lines and the success of it and the credentials, you were able to say, hey, to Golden Era,
Fraser. Yeah.
to Fraser, I get you don't have the time, but here's what I can help you meet you in the middle with, because now I don't have the following per se. No offense to you, but that was kind of the middle part of the Nerd Closet, because you had the connections, the contacts, you had, things in China and stuff like that. Hell, you even had the licensing, but the brand awareness.
Right.
To your point,
when you're starting from scratch,
yeah,
you're at the mercy of your marketing, because like I said before, if you don't, you can have the best stuff in the world. If the world doesn't know, then
right,
you're not going to sell anything.
And as we know from other toy lines that have licenses with legends, icons, and wrestling,
right?
To be honest, a lot of their marketing is Facebook groups, word of mouth. These toys are great. These toys are So it's a lot of moving parts to boot. So I think you guys being like, oh, these are finally going to come to life,
which was
a huge selling point for you.
Yes,
guys.
It was, because it ultimately you're always trying to get your foot in the door, but we were already in.
Yeah.
He had already established for years that his style and his designs were sought after. And I'm shocked that it didn't get done sooner.
Did Fraser not have any other offers? I kind of refuse to believe that.
I think he mentioned maybe one.
Okay.
But I think I'm not going to bring up any names, but
no, you don't have to. But I just the idea. I think
saying, I think they just
artwork for years. So the fact that he couldn't launch it sooner is a little like, really.
I think the outfit that did reach out to him just had way too much on their plate. I think they just had so much going on that they couldn't successfully pull the trigger and get things moving, because they had so much going on behind the scenes. So which is not Fraser's fault.
No, not at all.
But
not at all. He might have even been interested at the time. So
he was interested, and just patiently waited and never heard anything. And then next thing you know, I'm reaching out to him, and he's like, okay, what do you want to do? Because I'll be honest with you, I don't have time to deal with anything outside of the designing part of it. I just want to be the designer. I'm like, you do that.
Right.
I'll do everything else.
And like any other business, that's okay too, because it's like, this is your role. This is your role. If it's a cumulative effort, that's okay.
So I got things rolling pretty quick. I got the Nerd Closet, as far as the online store and everything, up and running pretty quick with help from some friends. And as far as the contacts, now a lot of these toy makers, that's the biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
From what I've heard.
Yeah. Even guys like Mattel, to your point earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a difficult challenge just to get a meeting or a phone call or a conversation struck up with a lot of these guys, just because of their schedules. They're probably getting hit left and right by thousands of other offers and different products, and they're just like,
Right.
I mean, let's be honest. They really have to believe in something wholeheartedly, or have somebody actually that's, an influencer to them, tell them, hey, you might want to check these guys out. You might want to get involved with this at ground level, because this is going to be something special. I really like what they're doing. So it was just kind of a cocktail of that. I mean, I had a lot of contacts from my previous years of course, we did signings here in my hometown. We did virtual signings during the pandemic. We did some conventions after the pandemic. So that contact list and working with these guys these past several years built up.
Right. It was going to grow. So with that, I have to talk about it because, you were very good friends through the virtual signings with Road Warrior Animal. Joe Laurinaitis.
I like to think so.
He did a virtual. He gave one of the best virtual signing experiences that I've ever been a part of. It got rave reviews. It got picked up online for not just the stories he was telling, but just what a great experience he gave. And here's the thing, right?
It's almost 5 hours long too.
Yeah. Yeah. He gave his time. Like he wasn't.
Oh, he was in at 100%. And he was.
And
he was one of the greatest guests we had.
Oh, easily. And look, unfortunately, this is going to sound like a negative statement, but it's the truth. You just never know what you're going to get with talent sometimes.
Right. That's truth.
Especially those that are superstars. And that's what the Road Warriors are. They may, to a degree, be the larger than life. I know we talk about people even before them to a degree, like Billy Graham, to a degree, Snuka and a couple guys, before them, Bruno and all that stuff. But the Road Warriors, it's no secret, it's said 1,000 times, changed the game, right?
100%.
There was nothing like them. And even if you look at like the early stages of the Road Warriors to get to the iconic look, there's still nothing like them. And that's something to be said, right? So the virtual is this wonderful experience. I'd never met or worked with them before. So I'm going in there cold as a fan because I won a raffle or a giveaway or something. And I was able to be a part of it. And he gave me such a wonderful experience as a fan because, at the end of the day, it's tough to be in the business and also be a fan and a collector. That's a separate podcast in and out of itself. So he gives me this wonderful experience. You stay friends with him. You do in-house conventions and signings with him or whatever. And he sadly passes, right? And what sucked about it was because he had such a vibrant experience virtually, it was a very sudden, like, what do you mean type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, here's the eerie truth about that. I actually talked to him late afternoon.
Okay.
The night he passed away.
Really?
He was scheduled to be in my hometown with Paul Ellering.
At the mall, right?
At the mall, like week or two. I think it was 2 weeks after I talked to him.
Mm-hmm.
So I called him. He was on a little retreat with Kim, and we were just kind of hashing out some things and talking about some other different ideas. And I ended up going to work that night on night shift, and then I came home, went to bed. Next morning, I thought my phone was going to catch fire because I was like, what in the heck is going on? I mean, it was like, it was pandemonium. Bang. Yeah. And I even seen a text from Kim, and I'm just like, what is going on? And then next thing you know, first thing I pop up Facebook and there it is. And I'm just like, it was a rough day.
Yeah. And here's the, not for you. It's much more visceral because you were friends. I've never even told you the story. So it was, correct me if I'm wrong. It was kind of holiday season, right? November-ish.
When he passed?
Yeah.
It was like right now, like September 20th, I believe.
So
his birthday was this past week.
Yeah, because he's September like I am. So I was thinking of like what I wanted to buy myself as a gift, right?
Right.
So I hit up a mutual friend of ours. And I remember in the live signing, I had said to him, I was like, hey man, I you were great. I wish I had something to sign. I kind of didn't line up. I really would have loved for you to have signed my Legends of Wrestling game because I loved the game as a kid. They were all over it. They were a huge part of the marketing.
So his birthday was the 12th.
Okay.
His birthday was the 12th, and he passed away on September 22nd. 2020.
Okay, so it had to be the beginning of September because I was already thinking birthday or Christmas, whatever.
Right.
So in the live stream, backtrack, I was like, hey, man, yeah, someday I'd love for you to sign my video game because you're a huge part. I used to play as you guys all the time. And he's like, oh, just get it to these guys and I'll sign it for you. Just super casual. He's like, yeah, man, we'll work something out. Don't worry. He's giving me the Iggy on camera.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, just get it to these guys and I'll take care of you, whatever you want. And just send it to me in a box and I'll get it right to you. Just put the return label in it. I was like, oh shit. So I'm thinking about it and I was like, man, you know what? Other people were in the area post-pandemic around the holidays. And I'm like, not for nothing. I'd love to get this done now. You know, remember what he said? I hit up a mutual friend of ours. Oh yeah, no problem. I'll get in touch with him. And if we can't hook up with him at an in-person signing, we'll mail it to him. No problem. Next day.
Yep.
Next day.
It was rough.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was,
and again, just seeing such a genteel...
It was a bad day all around.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. And
I mean, there's been plenty of wrestlers come and go. I mean, just recently, you know, Sid passed away, and
right, another great guy.
I'd worked with Sid a couple times, but you know, this wasn't a. I didn't have a conversation. I didn't have a relationship with Sid as I did with Joe. It just seemed like me and Joe clicked a lot on a lot of things, and we were always trying to create something different that hadn't been done. That was always his mindset. He was always wanting to do something different. I don't want to do what everybody else is doing. I want to do this. I want to try this. And we had talked about toys briefly before. And then, of course, we did the wrestling buddies through the Gadors.
Yeah, those sold out immediately also.
Yeah, and that's kind of how it got started with Joe and I just trying to brainstorm. You know, during the pandemic, there was no money coming in for any of these guys, so they were looking for ideas.
Sure.
So that's, you know, when I had a signing with Hacksaw and Buff Bagwell. I had a conversation with them during the pandemic, right at the beginning. They're like, we don't know what we're going to do. We're having to cancel all of our appearances.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean the mortgage just stops or the electric gets turned off, that kind of stuff. Yep. And I'm like, what can I do? So it's funny that you and I are on here talking on StreamYard. That's kind of what we just, you know, I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, what if we just brought the convention to them?
Right. And you guys were pioneers of that, by the way. You and your...
Yeah, I think, you know...
Your gathering.
Yeah, I think we did a pretty good job evolving from the beginning till the end. Of course, at the end of the pandemic, nobody really needed it anymore. But, you know, during it was the only game in town. And there was a lot of... I don't want to say they're copycats, but there was a lot of people trying to do the same thing we were doing. But I think ultimately...
Well, it's inevitable, like anything in wrestling or entertainment, right?
Yeah, I think ultimately we were changing the game pretty quick. And,
I agree.
But yeah, I mean, it's a shame that it's not still a thing because I kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I like that, you know, personal one-on-one with a lot of these guys and getting to hear them talk about their life experiences and people coming in and having a chat with them one-on-one, because let's be honest, we all know that never happened. When you go to a convention, you don't get that one-on-one time. You're getting herded through like cattle. It's time is money kind of thing. They really don't have time to sit there and go.
That's true.
You know, into a big conversation about life and some of their past experiences and stuff. So it was just, you know, it was nice to give that opportunity to people sitting at home trying to wait this thing out. And ultimately, you know, it progressed into, who'd have thought, you know, doing virtuals would progress into making toys.
Yeah. And it's crazy because prior to the pandemic and stuff like that, people were dabbling in virtual as a medium, and they were just like, oh, I'm not seeing this. And
it was really kind of getting started because out of necessity, really, because of the pandemic, and nobody could be in the same room with you. This was it.
Right.
I mean, this was the interaction between employer and employee. So that concept slowly trickled into, you know, where we were at the beginning of the pandemic. It was just like, hey, what's the next best thing? If you can't have a convention, what's the next best thing? And of course, cameos started popping up. where you could get a video. But still, it was like we were taking that concept a little bit further.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool to have a video, personal video sent to you by your favorite celebrity. But what would it be like to actually talk to them?
Yeah.
Face to face, one on one.
You guys also ushered and managed and navigated the experience very well too, because you kind of like, hey guys, we're live. Come on in. You're ahead of time. We got a lot of people, but we're gonna get each of you your moment, your item, your this, your that, and also you're getting like the reassurance of, obviously it's a camera, it's being signed. To spell that out for me. Absolutely. Look at that. Take a look at it. Here it was not just this kind of,
yeah,
and that's
and there was a few of the, there was, let's be honest, there was a few of those out there, but it's just,
yeah, but that's it.
That's again, not what I wanted. I wanted to be, I wanted somebody the full experience. I wanted them to be a part of something special and feel that they got their money's worth. So I think we did fairly well. I mean, as far as meeting everybody's expectations, because I think a lot of them were starstruck. They were just like, I am literally talking to Road Warrior Animal in my kitchen. And at the same time, he's sitting in his kitchen and his wife's in the background making cups. So just like when we had Kevin Nash on, he was sitting there, his wife was making him dinner while we were on camera.
Another great one was the Nash one.
Yeah.
Nash was good. Bischoff, I enjoyed.
Bret
Anytime Victoria
Hart, DDP,
Slaughter, Duggan.
Oh yeah, all the Golden Era guys were all for it. Snake.
Through that, you're like, okay, I'm fairly confident I could do something with the Road Warriors license, estate, what have you. The Steiners, was that foreign to you? Was that through navigation? How do you get to Rick and Scott? Because ultimately, we're at a point as fans kind of where, and this is a semi-bold statement I'm going to make. Steiner Brothers, one of the best tag teams ever, totally lacking in action figures. So it was a genius pull as individuals and as a team. So it was a genius pull for you to get them.
Well, I mean, I already talked. I'd already had a relationship with Scotty, and of course, I met him in Jersey, several years ago.
Yeah,
running him around, we were trying to find something to eat, that kind of thing, and got to know each other. And I kind of mentioned to him, hey, I'm going to start making toys. Are you interested in being a part of it? And he's like, yeah, just let me know. And of course, I had his contact info.
Sure.
And can't remember if it was him or somebody else that gave me Rick's. Anywho, reached out to Scott, showed him the renders, showed him, the Matt Maniacs that we wanted to do. Of course, he's like, I don't look nothing like me. And I was like, well, I told him, I said, like, look, Scott, I said, I know there's not the realism there. I get that. It's not the style that we're going for.
Yeah.
And everybody says, oh, great, another retro company. Well, let's back up to that, because when I started talking to Frazier and we decided to make this Matt Maniacs line, we weren't trying to do what everybody else was doing. We wanted to do the best style and design as we could in the 4-inch size figure.
Right.
We were not trying to be a copycat. Let's just be honest. We got some great toys out there from Hastel. We got great toys from Zombie Sailor Toys. I mean, you got all these retro lines, plus Mattel, plus the 90s version of the Hasbros that you're trying to either mimic or stack up against. And that's not what we were wanting to do. So to get back to it, everybody started screaming retro whenever we released our lineup. And I'm like, I mean, what is retro?
Right.
I'm like, is it because the wrestlers are the older wrestlers, that's why they're retro, or is it the style of figure? So I mean, let's be honest. A lot of the retros, in my personal opinion, this is just me, is a semi-real representation of the actual wrestler.
Right, right.
There is a fine line of realism between cartoony and looking real. Because let's be honest, the Zombie Sailor retros are very realistic, very detailed.
Absolutely.
There's a lot to them, a lot of things going on there. Um, and then you go to the Hastel side of things, and you got what KWK. Who else is in the game?
Pastel, KWK, Zombie.
Rush was in there for a little bit, but I don't know
Rush
that
was
they're
in
doing.
there for a little bit, and he's rebranding from what I heard. I think retro wise, that's about everybody in wrestling. Yeah.
So each company has its own style of retro. I think Zombie me being more of the realistic side
Yep.
of the line,
Yeah.
with Hastel paying a little bit more homage to the Hasbros and that cartoony feel to them,
Yeah.
simplistic, if you will. Um, but ours, I think we're a little bit of, I think we're a little bit more of a cartoony feel of it, but a different kind of cartoony. I think we're like
Right.
a Pixar and a rock and wrestling type of
Rock
marriage,
and wrestling is what I envision for those toys. Absolutely. That's great.
and the proportions, our proportions of our figures are a little bit more true than some of the other ones, where maybe the arms are a little bit longer, maybe they're not, their torsos might be shorter. I mean, just
Right.
different differences.
You also bring up something very interesting of like, oh, what is a retro? My counter to that also, as a collector or a consumer too, is like, well, if you would have produced 2 or 4 inch elites, let's say,
Yeah.
well, that then you would have said, oh, you're doing
Many
you know,
elites.
mini elites. So
Yeah.
there is never going to be like a healthy middle, right? And then I remember when the retros came out, they were like that first wave with like Warrior and everybody. Everybody was like, this looks nothing like the Hasbro's, and it's like, well, we're trying to give you old and new. And to your point, also with the wrestlers you're featuring, Rick Steiner, Scott Steiner, Road Warrior Animal, Road Warrior Hawk, it fits their era also.
Right.
So you want something in that wheelhouse of cartoony, true to their era, true to their dominance, and I think all of you guys are doing that exceptionally.
Yeah, I
But
think I think every line is paying homage in their
yeah,
own way, in their own style, to the golden era of wrestling. And ultimately that's, a lot of our favorites from back in the day.
yeah,
And I just think that yes, we are in the same scale as everybody else, but we're not, no ballpark of the same style or design. I think we've grasped a newer look
yeah, a
to
healthy middle
things,
almost.
with paying homage to the old school Hasbro's, but yet taking it to another direction and possibly in a better direction. It may
Right,
be that we make our figures a little better than some of the faults of Hasbro. Maybe we've learned from
right,
some of the things that we didn't like back in the 90s, that we can manipulate and change and sculpt into what we think they might have been back then.
sure, sure.
And no,
Now,
and that's not dissing Hasbro, because we all know that the Hasbro line was legendary.
yeah,
Were they completely 10 out of 10? No.
right,
Some of them fell off the mark, but you're talking way before the digital age. These figures back then were all hand sculpted,
yeah,
and they had to use bodies and parts and everything, reuse molds, and that still gets done today. Let's be honest, molds are cost money.
right,
Now, ultimately, they used the molds a couple times that I probably wouldn't have done. Like, you had the 1 2 3 Kid and Rick Rude and Ric Flair. Probably not one of my favorite molds, because
yeah,
the figure itself is kind of scrawny, which I
yeah.
get it. 1 2 3 Kid was perfect, but then they took it, and I don't know. I
It's
think,
funny you say that, because as a fan of all three of those guys and that particular mold being on 3 different wrestlers that I love so much,
yeah,
I feel like it fit the Rick Rude perfectly because he's posing to a degree.
Kinda, yeah.
It fits the body of 1-2-3 Kid, but the pose is terrible.
Right.
And the head sculpt of the flare alone, none of that works for me. And especially like the flare snare, I've never seen anything advertises that.
And I think it ultimately goes down to Hasbro did the best they could with what they had.
Yes.
And they may have been quite the fanboys that maybe we are with our toy line. Maybe
right.
That lack of attention to detail
yeah,
wasn't in their wheelhouse at the time. And, you know, ultimately it comes down to money. And maybe there were certain obstacles that they couldn't fix or get worked out in production. So those are all things but I think they did, you know, it's obvious that they've become the staple or the
icons of
the benchmark, the
toys.
Legends of the 4-inch figure. So my hat's off to them. I had several of them. I still have several of them.
Same.
But my thought process in the whole making of toys is I don't want to do something that somebody's already doing.
Right.
If I thought that these were knockoffs of something that's already being done, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have wasted my time.
You want to be the first you, in a sense.
I want to be the first Nerd Closet. I want to be the first Matt Maniacs. I want to set myself aside of the other guys, of what they're doing. I want to be over here. Your guys' stuff's great. I want to be great, but I want to be over here.
Right, right.
That's what I want to do. I want to do something new. I want to do something different. That's why whenever I partnered up with Frazier in the Golden Era of Wrestling, he had already established a unique feel and design to his figures. Yes, they are 4-inch because he loves them. He loves 4-inch. He loves all the retros from Mattel and Hasbro and all the other companies. He has all of them. Yeah. And I have a bunch of them. So we just wanted to put our own spin on it, ultimately. He had already done that. I mean, he already done that. I mean, I walked in, I was already a fan of his old stuff.
But you brought it in to realism, fruition, if you will.
Right. And I think with that idea of him and I going in the direction of mass production, he wanted them to evolve as well. So if you look at his older stuff, you can see the evolution of the design from his first days of doing these to now. And I think, don't get me wrong, I think those old designs are just as great as the new ones, but you can just tell that he wanted to tweak them to be perfect, to be something that everybody would love. And I'm not saying that we'll never revisit that old design because it's possible. Anything's possible.
Right.
But in order to do mass production, especially starting out, you can't afford to have 60 different molds. You can't. You just can't do it. And every toy maker will tell you the same thing. You have to minimize your mold costs.
Right.
You can keep your product pricing down.
Right.
If you're spending buku bucks on the molds, next thing you know, you got a $60 figure, and people are like, I can't afford that.
And it also takes longer to make.
It does. Those molds are very time consuming. If anybody's ever looked into that, that is a time consuming part of making toys by far, because once the molds are done and tested, sky's the limit. You just start cranking out parts. But it takes a little while to get there, usually a month and a half to 2 months just to get the molds right. Because if they're wrong this much, everything that's made after that is going to be wrong.
And you got to go all the way back to the drawing board.
All the way back. Another 2 months.
Yeah.
Another month to fix everything. And then you got to rerun everything that was wrong. So it's crucial with the process that your 3D files and those molds have to be perfect.
Right.
Because if it's not, and it's happened in all toy companies, it's happened where that one little thing got by, and now they're either trashing or recalling thousands of figures because it was not caught until after production. And everybody's just like, whoa, quality issues, quality issues. Well, that's the little things. Just it could be a engineering design flaw to where your figures don't stay together, or the arm breaks if you put pressure on it.
Yep.
I mean, it's all those moving parts. The more articulation you have, the worse it can get. So it's
was more common with the toys we grew up with, and we didn't even know it. So here we are today.
Yeah.
Right. So we already know pre-orders have closed, obviously, on Series 1 for Matt Maniacs. We've got Rick Steiner, Scott Steiner, Road Warrior Animal, Road Warrior Hawk, essentially in WWF 92 style attires, Hasbro themed or whatever. We can already tease and confirm to a degree, right? Powers of Pain, Demolition for Series 2.
Yep.
What can we look to for names and licenses to the future? You don't have to like just outright, but are we going to stay as a tag team theme here? What can you kind of confirm and deny for me?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I like the tag team scene.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know. That was a big deal when I was growing up. Was the tag team scene was it, and I looked forward to it as much as I did the main events with all the other big guys. But do I think we'll see some singles? Never say never.
Right.
I mean, that could change tomorrow. I mean, we could do a single of this guy or a single of that guy, not necessarily a tag team, or or we could mix and match. And the possibilities are endless when it comes to this line, because not only is there a plethora of great tag teams out there that people are dying for you to make.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of grudge match type of scenarios.
Right.
Just an example. This is not real, but just an example. Say, like, just for instance, WrestleMania 3, Ricky Steamboat against Macho Man.
Yeah.
Imagine that in the 2-pack.
Never been on a card together, oddly enough.
You could even do a Macho, maybe George the Animal Steel. I mean,
yeah.
There's all these grudges. There's all these rivalries that were created throughout the years that could get revisited through Matt Maniacs as well. And there's also that option of doing a manager, doing a jobber, doing,
Yeah.
I hate to say jobber. These guys work their butts off just like the regular guys is. They just didn't get the push.
But more obscure wrestlers in essence by comparison. Because it's true, you could just come out and say, hey, again, to kind of quote you right now, this is not real. But you could come out and say by Series 4, we've given you 2, 4, 6, 8 wrestlers. Now we're going to give you an enhancement talent pack for what you have. That's a great concept too. I'm just going to put it out there that only because I'm a huge fan of theirs, just as friends, make me a promise that if you get the Heavenly Bodies, I get one of the first ones out of the container, if that ever comes to fruition.
And that was what, Gigolo Jimmy Del Rey and
Gigolo Jimmy Del Rey, Dr. Tom Pritchard. They do have the figures toy ones. Shout out to them finally. Well, actually only Tom Pritchard does. So hey, I mean, maybe I just put something in my man's ear here. Maybe I just kind of wished it into existence, as the young kids say. I'm just saying, I think that there's more of a market out there for the Heavenly Bodies than the toy makers want to believe. That's all.
Well, I want to say this. We've lost a lot of great wrestlers out there.
Yeah, man.
The list just keeps getting longer every year. Sometimes the obstacle is getting a hold of family or whoever to be able to, because nobody wants to make toys without permission.
Right,
It's a morale thing. It's a no-no. If you don't have permission, you don't make them. Simple as that. But sometimes the obstacle is getting a hold of the right people to be able to do them correctly and be able to have permission to do these these toys because, I mean, let's be honest, sky's the limit on who we can do because Frazier's already done in his own personal collection. I mean, the entire Golden Era roster, the entire WCW roster. But, I mean, just like Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan, The Rock, Stone Cold, all these heavy, heavy hitters, they're not just going to give anybody permission to do those figures. Now, obviously, the WWE has no holds barred with any of those guys. They can do whatever they want.
Right.
So, of course, Frazier shows off a lot of his figures that he's designed, and some of them are what I call untouchable or unreachable. Never say never. You think we'll ever do a Stone Cold? Who knows? I could run into him tomorrow and he could say, well, how come you haven't made a toy of me?
Right.
I mean, you just don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know who's watching. Heck, WWE could come knocking one day and say, hey, we like your style. Let's make it official.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
True.
In the meantime, I'm going to make the figures that we can make. If that's, just by example, if that's, like you said, the Heavenly Bodies, Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, some of these older guys, you got Hacksaw, you got Slaughter. Of course, I'd like to think I'm decent friends with Slaughter. I think he would probably do one for us if I sweet talk him a little bit with some donuts.
Okay.
But yeah, it's all about having the right conversation with the right person. And when you think something's unattainable or untouchable, that's when life just kind of throws you a curveball and says, oh, by the way. And in this business, everybody knows everybody. Everybody talks. Everybody likes to put everybody over or condemn them at the same time.
It takes that one endorsement.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought that doing virtuals would, put me in the path of toy making? Did I think that when I started? Absolutely not.
Right. It was a hobby at best.
But the nice thing about it is that contact list that accumulated on my phone from all these greats is now trickling over into the toy business.
Right.
And let's be honest, that's one of the biggest obstacles a lot of these toy makers have is getting a hold of these guys and getting them to trust them to do the toys and put them out there in a timely fashion. So
right.
I do what I can.
I think you guys are really gonna kick butt when these guys launch, and to think that we're just seeing renders, prototypes, digital art, and not even card backs yet, and it's gotten quite the buzz, is awesome. That's
the thing about the packaging. There again, I wanted to stand alone. I told Frazier, I was like, I don't want to do a Hasbro card.
Yeah.
It's nothing against the Hasbro card. I just don't want it to do the same thing that's already being done. I want to do something new and fresh. I want to give it its own feel and its own look. And maybe 30 years down the road, people will say the same thing about us as they did about Hasbro. I mean, I just want to be have some kind of pioneer vision in what we do. I just don't want to be a cookie cutter and do the same thing everybody else is doing. Like I said, don't get me wrong. The Hasbro cards are great. I used to make them myself. I just didn't want to go down that route. And it has its own.
Respect that.
It has its own problems as well. Cards, everybody knows cards can be a pain in the butt. They can easily take damage and the bubbles come off and you have glue issues and those were just things I didn't want to have to deal with. At the same time, I just wanted to do something different, and the box was ultimately both mine and Frazier's idea.
I love that, and it's gotten quite a buzz. I can't wait for them to launch. I cannot tell you how cool this has been and informative for me as a collector, as a buddy, and you've always been really, really great with me. I wish nothing but the sky for you, man. I really got a good feeling about this. So here's to you and yours. Here's to Frazier, Nerd Closet, Matt Maniacs, of course. And thank you so much for your time and being so insightful and open about this process, and I can't wait
Thanks
for
for
it to
having
launch.
me, man. I hope we can do it again. Maybe we'll be talking about new developments in the line and maybe something else coming down the
I hope
road.
so. I hope after the Series 1 launch, we'll come in, we'll regroup, maybe talk a little Series 3 at that time, kind of building the seeds right there. That I think that's a good
And
revisit.
let's be honest, we've got enough.
Inventory, digital inventory.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've got enough connections and renders right now to probably keep us busy for the next 10 to 15 years. And
Right.
that's straight up truth.
Yeah, and again, if you follow this gentleman's artwork the way I have on Instagram, then you know exactly what we're talking about. I mean, this has been exceptional. I just want to really, 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 I really want you guys to see the genuine humility on my face for this moment, for everything that's happening here. I mean, this has been such a great conversation for me. And again, I can't thank you enough for your time. And again, good luck. And we're going to talk about this right after Series 1 launches. So, ladies and gentlemen, Nerd Closet, Matt Maniacs, this is Rocky Turner. Following conversation was scheduled for one fall. This has been the voice, Cheyenne Ortiz.